This is Darksiders 3, developed by Gunfire Games and published by THQ Nordic. So a bit of a history lesson for Darksiders before we get started. So the Darksiders series started 2010 with the first Darksiders. That was developed by Vigil Games and published by THQ. They went on to make Darksiders 2, same team, same publisher, but THQ filed for bankruptcy, I think in the same year, maybe right after Darksiders 2 came out. So the series was kind of thrown up in the air and kind of sold off to pay for THQ's assets, or to pay for their debts rather, and was bought by Nordic Games, and Nordic Games eventually rebranded themselves as THQ Nordic, who are now publishing Darksiders 3. Vigil Games had to disband because THQ were their parent company, and since THQ were in bankruptcy, Vigil Games obviously couldn't continue. The two founders of Vigil Games, Joe Madureira and David Adams, went on to found their own companies. Joe Madureira founded Airship Studios, who made Battle Chasers Night War, which has been on the channel before, and David Adams founded Gunfire Games, which are now making Darksiders 3. So it's a different developer and it's a different publisher, but it's actually the same people making the game. Darksiders hasn't changed hands or anything like that, it's still the same development team. Right, now back to Darksiders 3. So Darksiders 3 follows along from the Darksiders series. It's a kind of hack and slash Metroidvania type game. If you're unfamiliar with the story, Darksiders are the four horsemen of the apocalypse. In the first game, War lands on Earth in the middle of a battle between heaven and hell, and is more or less accused of starting the apocalypse, because he wasn't supposed to be there, and War only shows up when the apocalypse starts. So what's going on? So the first game, he's meant to try and find out who actually started it, because he knows he didn't do it. Darksiders 2, you play as Death, another horseman of the apocalypse, set at the same time as Darksiders 1, and he's basically saying, there's no way War started this, I'm going to find proof that someone was trying to frame him. That's Darksiders 2's story. Darksiders 3, you now play as Fury, another horseman of the apocalypse, the only female horsewoman, I guess, horseperson, that sounds like a centaur, of the apocalypse, and she is tasked with hunting down and killing or imprisoning the 7 deadly sins, who are actual physical embodiment demons. That's the story. The game kind of plays like a mix of, and this kind of goes for the whole Darksiders series, it's kind of a mix of God of War, the old God of Wars, the hack and slashy ones, with the dungeon crawling and open map of Legend of Zelda, and the kind of progression of finding items and going back to old areas like Metroid or Castlevania. In addition to this, Darksiders 3, the combat actually plays a lot more like Dark Souls than God of War, in that you're not hammering the attack button anymore, now you're hammering the dodge button. So they've kind of traded the sort of hack and slashy crowd control for a more focused timed dodging, since Fury has no block, so you're not hiding behind a shield, you're just dodging around enemies, kind of like Bayonetta, I suppose, in that if you dodge at the right moment, time slows down, you get a nice counter in. Additionally, they've added the kind of checkpoint and corpse run mechanics that Dark Souls has, that Diablo has, and so on, in that when you die, all of your stuff is left on your corpse and you need to go run over and pick it all back up. In a way that they make it a bit nicer, in this game, if you die while running for your corpse, you don't lose that corpse, you just have another corpse with the stuff you picked up on that run. So you can have it littered with corpses if you like, but you don't lose your stuff. As long as you make it back there, at some point you can pick it back up. So Darksiders 3, overall it's good, it's not great. A little disappointed, only because I've been waiting like 6 years since Darksiders 2 to play Darksiders 3, but it's a little disappointing. Fury has 4 different elemental forms. It's like fire, like lightning, earth, or gravity, or something like that, and I don't remember what the 4th one is. Ice, I think. I can't remember. That give you different weapons, but you can't swap between them quickly, within your combo. I think that would have been nice if you could, mid-combination, you could swap to the earth weapon and then swap over to the lightning weapon and then swap back to your regular weapon and something like that, which you can't do. You need to have stopped, and then you can swap element. Another problem that I have with the combat is dogpiling and hit stun, so I will explain. In the game, the enemies appear to have the AI that if one enemy gets a hit in, every other enemy engaged with you at the time will attack you. And what happens there is your character has a hit stun, in that once they're hit, they have a couple of seconds where they can't move, and then you regain control and then you can dodge. That's what hit stun is. Every time you get hit, that timer resets. So if the enemy is dogpiling and constantly attacking you, your hit stun is constantly resetting, which means you never get a chance to evade and you die. What that eventually means is, if you're engaged with more than 2 enemies and you get hit once, you're dead. There's no way around. If you're lucky, you might manage to dodge, but chances are you're just gonna get comboed to death, and that's the end of it. And that kind of makes the difficulty setting of the game irrelevant, because all you have to do is get hit once. I mean, the game is actually quite tough. You are relying very heavily on that dodge and the slowdown for that dodge, because you have a certain amount of invincibility for it. There is good character progression for Fury. I do like the character. I didn't like the character at the beginning. I do like the character at the end. Would have liked more interaction with the other horsemen. They do show up every now and then, but there's not enough. Because I'm not entirely sure if we're going to get a Darksiders 4, so I was kind of hoping there'd be a bit more in this. Despite the game, well, not necessarily being in development for 6 years, but being 6 years before it came out, it does still kind of feel like it was rushed. There's a lot of things to like in Darksiders 3. The combat is fun. The different elemental abilities are good as well. You've got like super jumps and walking on water and walking under the water and having massive swinging hammers and things like that. Combat can be fun. I think the interplay between the different elements would have been more interesting, as in, as I said already, letting me swap between elements during combos, or giving me enemies that are, weak to some elements, so not necessarily requiring me to use those, but I'd be rewarded for using them, and vice versa, enemies who are strong on some elements, so if I swapped to that one I wouldn't take as much damage, those kind of things. I don't feel like they were thought of, or they kind of ignored them. It's just, I do feel like they could have done more with it, and if they had, it would have been, a pretty great game. As it stands now, it's still good, but not amazing. And because it's not amazing, I don't think we'll see Darksiders 4, and that's kind of disappointing to me. Unless, of course, everybody watching this video goes out and buys it. Please do. I really want to see Darksiders 4 and the Fourth Horseman. This is Beat Saber, an independent title from Beat Games. Beat Saber is a virtual reality rhythm game. It's pretty straightforward. You have 2 sabers, or 2 big sticks, if you like, color-coded red and blue, and you have red and blue cubes floating towards you in a particular rhythm to the beat of music, and you have to slice them in a particular orientation. So up or down, left and right, and if they're rotating, various angles and so on. And you have to cut the cubes based on the color of the cubes and the color of your saber. So you match them up, slice the red cubes with the red saber, slice the blue cubes with the blue saber. Pretty straightforward until you realize this is a really fast song and they're coming at you pretty fast and they're moving sides and they're moving around and they're rotating and suddenly they're disappearing off the screen. You can get a bit hectic. It's lots of fun despite being very simple. There are a couple of different modes. Very straightforward ones are just Guitar Hero style. Just keep your score up, don't mess up too often, and just get to the end of the song with all your lives intact, if you like, with your power bar intact. Other ones might have stipulations where you just can't make any mistakes, or the direction on the cube will disappear before it gets to you, so you need to keep an eye on it. Or you need to rack up a particular score, so you need to, perfectly cut these things in half. That kind of thing. The game will also throw these kind of walls at you, either left and right or above your head, that you'll need to physically move your body, either left or right, or squat down. You can't play this in a chair, unless your chair can go up and down, I guess, at a moment's notice. Then I guess you could, but otherwise you should probably stand up and do some squats. You can really work up a bit of a sweat playing this. I mean, you can get sweaty enough with a VR helmet on, but you really get sweaty playing Beat Saber. It's a lot of fun. It's very simple, but very fun to play. I can't feel myself sort of grinning like an idiot playing the game. I'm very glad I'm not recording myself doing it, flopping around the place. Some restrictions for it. It is currently PSVR exclusive, and you will also need 2 PS Move controllers. There is an early access version of it for PC VR devices, so your Vives and your Oculus and so on. But you'll obviously need a fairly beefy PC to play that. If you're trying to get in on the bottom rung for Beat Saber, it's PSVR and Move controllers. But if you already have a PSVR, pick up Beat Saber, and you probably already have. If you don't, this is a good candidate for actually picking up VR, because this is a ton of fun. Check it out if you can get a chance. This is a very good candidate for why VR is a viable platform. This is Déraciné, developed by From Software, published by Sony Interactive Entertainment, and directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki, he of Dark Souls fame. Déraciné, I think I'm pronouncing that right, is a VR title, currently exclusive to PSVR. In the game, you take on the role of a fairy, mystical being with no physical form, so they don't have to worry about rendering a physical form. Game played in first person, and is set up as a kind of mystery hidden object puzzle game. You follow a couple of orphans around an orphanage, trying to fix some mistakes in their lives. So for instance, there's one orphan who is currently crippled, and the headmaster asks you to go back in time to stop the event that caused her leg to become crippled, become broken, whatever it was, injured. And you do, by doing VR busy work, more or less, walking around the environment, just looking around objects physically with your head, picking things up with the move controllers, rotating them with the triggers, reaching your hand out, that kind of thing. It's very basic. It's very high fidelity, I'll give it that. I think it's well produced and well performed by the actors to some extent. It's not amazing now, but the actual gameplay is very basic, very simple VR stuff. You're kind of in it for the story, which is good because it's like a mystery kind of, I'm not going to go so far as to say Soulsy style, but it's got that sort of element of what the hell's going on here, there's something weird happening. But yeah, it's just VR busy work. That's all I can really say about it. It's like tech demo stuff, just picking stuff up and rotating it, and ooh, isn't that cool? And yeah, if it's like your first experience with VR, it is very cool. But if it's not, you've done this before. Check it out if you want. I think it was very reasonably cheap. I think it was 40, maybe 30 euro. If you already have PSVR. If you don't already have PSVR, this isn't a game you should, run to the shop and buy it for. Even though it's made by the Dark Souls-y, Bloodborne-y guy, as far as I can tell, it has no direct relation to that series. So if you're a fan of that's either of those series, you're not missing anything here. It's not related, as far as I can tell anyway. So yeah, kind of okay. It's well produced, high fidelity. Clearly a lot of work went into it. It's just there's not a ton of interesting stuff to do.
Won't you be friends with us? Please?
This is Pokémon Let's Go, developed by Game Freak and published by the Pokémon Company and Nintendo. So Pokémon Let's Go comes in two varieties, comes in Pokémon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. All footage you'll see here is from Let's Go Eevee, which is the game I got. So the best way to describe the Let's Go games is kind of an intermediate between your traditional Pokemon games, Pokemon Red or Pokemon Gold or Pokemon whatever you want, typically on other Nintendo platforms, which kind of play like JRPGs in a way, and with Pokemon Go, the mobile app game. So So it's kind of bridging the gap between the two of them. It's got the kind of simplified controls of Pokemon Go with the kind of big open world and story team building kind of thing you have in the Pokemon games. So you can think of it as a better Pokemon Go, or you can think of it as a simplified regular Pokemon game. In the Let's Go series, you have Pikachu and Eevee who follow you around as a walking Pokemon. They ride around on your head or run around behind you, and you can interact with them, play with them, feed them, pet them. They'll find hidden items for you, and generally they interact with you throughout the story. Story-wise, it's still generally the same kind of Pokemon progression. You go from getting your starter Pokemon, working your way through the map, and you battle at the different gyms, collect badges, battle the Elite Four, and become, the greatest Pokemon master of all time, like everybody else before you. Some differences from the game. So, simplified controls. Capturing Pokemon doesn't require you to fight them. You capture them in the same way you would capture them in the mobile game, Pokemon Go, in that you kind of just pelt them with Pokeballs and hope that you catch them, more or less. You can feed them berries and use different Pokeballs with varying capture abilities and so on, but in general it plays the same way as the Pokemon Go app. Trying to find wild Pokemon, they appear on screen on the world map. If you want to catch them, just walk up to them and just bump into them, or if you're trying to avoid them and they bump into you, same deal. Pokemon combat is only initiated with other trainers, again, who you'll also see on the map. It does kind of play the same way as the regular Pokemon games in that you pick from your list of abilities. It's turn-based. It does play that the same way. You can swap out Pokemon and your opponent can swap out Pokemon and so on. So the combat isn't gone, it's just not as often. You'll only see it against trainers. Trainers appear on the map. You can only fight them once, which is kind of a detraction, because if you are trying to grind your Pokemon up, to get experience, the only way to get experience at that point would be to just capture random Pokemon, since you only get one shot at fighting. Or rather, one shot until you win. So I like it. It's not a full-fledged Pokemon JRPG. It's very much a simplified version. Very much, as I said, a bridge for the two of them. I would look at it as trying to get people who enjoy the Pokemon app and try to get them into playing the bigger, more involved Pokemon games, rather than someone coming from a Pokemon JRPG and, in a way, going backwards. I like to play it more usually when I'm doing something else. Rather than giving it my full attention, I'll be watching something on YouTube or waiting for something to render or something like that. Speaking of playing it while doing something else, I tend to play this handheld only, mostly because in handheld mode you use it as a gyroscope, so you can angle the screen in such a way that you can capture Pokemon that way. If you play the game docked, you have to use motion controls, which I really don't like. If you play the game docked, you have to use a single Joy-Con, or if you have the Pokeball fancy Joy-Con, you can use that as well. But it doesn't support the Pro Controller, and that's because it requires motion controls to capture Pokemon. You have to mimic throwing the ball with the Joy-Con, which is fine. It's kind of fun in some ways, and you can sort of, make curveball throws and things like that. From an accessibility point of view, it's not great for people, who have difficulty with motor control or who just can't use motion controls. It seems like a weird step back for Nintendo, since they're so very good at their accessibility stuff. But yeah, not something you could play for long stretches, I think, docked on the TV, just because the motion controls just get annoying after a while. But yeah, good for handheld. Again, if you're a full, Pokemon nerd and you're waiting for your JRPG, it's on its way. Game Freak are still working on a proper, I'm not necessarily going to say proper, but a more involved Pokemon game is on the way. Again, this is a bridge for people who like the Pokemon Go app, who aren't or weren't super into the JRPG kind of game, and want to just get more Pokemon. Again, I like it. Probably a bit too expensive for what you get. It is a full price, €69.99. Probably a bit too expensive in my mind for the kind of game that it is, but it is enjoyable. games I played for November 2018. Great to see Darksiders back. I just wish it was a little bit better than it was. I still had fun with it, but you know, I always expect a lot better. Anyway, Beat Saber is incredible and is borderline a good reason to get a VR helmet. Déraciné, I was interested to see what FromSoft were doing with VR, but it kind of turned out to be a fairly basic VR game. And Pokemon Let's Go Eevee is fine for just something to unwind at the end of the day. That's what I'm using it for. If you already have Pokemon Go and you already use that quite regularly, I'm not sure there's enough there for you. I don't know. Looking into next month, the last month of 2018, December 2018, we will be looking at Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I'm just working my way through the roster, just trying to unlock a few more people, just so I can get a more informed opinion to give you guys. We'll also be looking at Gris, which is a very pretty looking platform title. I don't know a whole lot about it other than it looks really nice, so we'll see what that's about. Also checking out a game called Below, which has been long in development and not a whole lot is known about it. As far as I know, it's kind of procedurally generated hardcore Legend of Zelda kind of game. Should be interesting. And I'll be taking a look at a game called Return of the Obra Dinn. Came out in October actually, but I didn't get around to playing it and it seemed really good, so I'm going to give it a go. Also to look forward to in December, I will be doing my end of year review or digest, or whatever way you want to look at it, where I'll look at my favorite games of the year, my least favorite games of the year, and so on. Something to check out anyway. Please give this a like, comment, you know, whatever, all that shenanigans, and I'll see you in the next video.